This theme of social enterprise has become a much talked issue in public policy making circles over the last 5 to 10 years. And as I've listened to the discussions in New Zealand about New Zealand being somewhat behind other like countries, particularly Australia, the UK, in the amount of investment in this area, I've come to appreciate just how much the Rotary Club internationally has for 100 years plus been a social enterprise of its own and spun off a good number of others. And we've had a number of discussions on the vocational committee about linking with the Akina Foundation, whose Chief Executive Alex Hannant is here today to talk about this major initiative, which is part government, part private sector funded, and might there just be some connections that can be made with this Rotary Club. So Alex, welcome.
So first, thanks so much for welcoming me along today and being able to speak about a little bit what we're seeing and the work that we do. I think I was going to give an overview of social enterprise and what we see the opportunity ahead is for New Zealand. But I think before, just putting in the context that this is really about enabling our communities to do better, and that's the overall context that we're working within. We've had incredible progress over the last 50 years or so, but so many things aren't getting solved or are going backwards. And so while social enterprise isn't a silver bullet to solving those problems, it does represent a new tool or a new approach to try and make things work better. So social enterprise, so sometimes this gets social enterprise makes people scratch their head a little bit. And I think it's because we almost have two mental models for doing well and doing good. But at its simplest, social enterprise is a business. And we know businesses are very effective at getting things done. It's just what social enterprises focus on is solving social and environmental problems. That's why they exist. The money that they make, they usually reinvest all or the majority of their funds back into the business, so that enables them to deliver a social impact, a bigger social impact. So that's the basic idea about what a social enterprise is and how it works. And without going through all the sort of variations, I just want to give a few examples to try and bring it to life. So sometimes I call them the Robin Hood businesses, that they will be set up as conventional businesses but use all the funds that they generate to go into something else which is less marketable. So these guys in Melbourne called YGAP run a series of restaurants and cafes. All the profits then go into a charitable foundation which supports social entrepreneurs in Southeast Asia. Something closer to home, Bernardo's runs a $30 million social enterprise, their childcare service. And the profits which are raised through that childcare service then go into funding the other services they provide to communities which are more dependent on government funding and less easy to market. Social enterprise also takes a big role at the community level. So quite often communities banding together to own their own assets. These guys are the Blue Skin Energy Trust down just north of Dunedin, who we've been supporting for the last 4 years. And they are seeking to basically develop their own wind cluster. And the profits generated from that small wind farm will then go back into the community to fund local development. That could be anything from garden fetes to childcare. It's their responsibility to figure out what. But it's about generating resources to make them more empowered. Quite often social enterprises basically will sell a conventional service and use that to subsidise the provision of that service to someone else who can't afford it. So you may have heard of Tom Shoes globally, but this is one a lot closer to home. It's Kiwi Optical, based here in Wellington. And they will sell glasses, and for every set of glasses they sell, they'll also provide a pair free to someone who cannot afford but would desperately need the use of better sight. They also will use some of their funds to ensure that there's better screening for sight services in Kiwi schools. Quite often social enterprises are used to actually create a nurturing environment for people to get back into society. So Jamie Oliver, the celebrity chef, has a business called 15, which brings kids that are living on the street and trains them up in restaurants, either as cooks or in hospitality. And it's a restaurant that people want to go because they want to eat Jamie Oliver's food, but it's actually providing skills, training and employment to people that have otherwise been left behind. They often find products that are waste and turn them into things that are valuable. So Arco, a social enterprise we just started working with up in the Northland, taking derelict houses and then turning the wood into designer, fashionable furniture, which they'll sell for a good rate, but use that funding to fund training and employment opportunity for young youth. And then last of all, there are social enterprises which just do things innovatively. So Chalkle, another Wellington-based social enterprise, is using technology to deliver community education in a fundamentally different way. So technology has disrupted pretty much everything. I'm not sure if this app was created in 40 minutes, but think about Trade Me for Learning, bringing together teachers and communities who want to learn through technology. Another outfit, Partu, young entrepreneurs from the Hawke's Bay who are doing Les Mills for Marai and Hapu, basically running a fitness service to improve people's health and well-being. And just last of all, to say that social enterprise doesn't have to be small. So this is a joint venture between Grameen Bank and, for those you may know, that Grameen Bank was the first microfinance bank in the world, and they've gone on to do many other things since. But they've partnered with Danone, the food technology group, to create a super yogurt which is sold at a marginal cost to families in developing countries, and it's a not-for-loss business. So all the profit generated goes into bringing the price of the product down or expanding the market they can reach. So that's kind of how it works. And this, as Richard mentioned, is picking up huge traction around the world. So you look in the UK, where there are now about 100,000 social enterprises up and trading. Australia, there are about 20,000. I've just come back from Korea last week. The Korean government have just passed the Social Enterprise Act to generate and support more social enterprises. Thailand has social enterprise policy and support services. So this is something which isn't just happening here. It's not a fad. It's something which is getting real traction around the world. And a big part of this is because these countries are invested in building the capability of entrepreneurs to be able to actually develop social purpose businesses. This hub space is actually in New Zealand House in London. It's the Westminster Hub, and it's an incredible place. It's vibrant, it has 400 young social entrepreneurs building businesses. And it's kind of ironic that we don't have too many of these things in New Zealand, but we are the landlord of something so innovative in a different country. It's also becoming mainstreamed in education. So again, in the UK, there are 59 universities which are part of a social enterprise development programme, where they include it in both formal and informal activities, but they are building social entrepreneurship as a key part of the curriculum. Enterprises to work need capital. So another key component here has been the development of social impact investment. So they reckon that last year about $50 billion US were put into impact investment around the world. The UK has started the first social investment bank, £650 million, which was actually realised from dormant bank accounts. You know, the government basically said to the banking sector, you owe us a few favours. Bank accounts which have been dormant for 15 years or more, use that to securitise and lend and provide capital for a new bank. The Australians have got the social enterprise development funds, 20 million government, 20 million private, and you're starting to see new innovations like there being a social tax credit. So in the same way you give money to charitable causes and get a tax rebate, if you do social investment, you would get the same. The G8 have just finished a task force on social impact investment, and the quote up there, just saying from David Cameron, that the social investment market is about increasing the spread of social innovation to tackle social and environmental challenges. New markets. People are wanting to buy from social enterprises, either consumers, but also big corporates. So Transfield, over the last 6-7 years or so, has deliberately focused on including social enterprises in its supply chain, knowing that money that they were going to spend anyway can actually enable new employment opportunities, new social value. And so it's not about just writing a check to a good cause, it's about integrating social enterprises into the whole business ecosystem. Auckland Council has just been procuring some of its community waste management, or its waste management project, contracts out to community, enabling communities to get contracts, raise revenue, and then take power of their own destiny. I won't go into this, but there's something called the Social Impact Bond that's just started to get traction. Our government is piloting one of these at the moment, but recognising that social change has a material value. If you stop people going back into prison, that has a value. And so we should reward organisations which are doing effective interventions on their outcomes rather than just giving grants up front. So the whole kind of ecosystem is changing here. So what's the current opportunity? Well, from our point of view, we're a small organisation who is tasked with supporting social entrepreneurs and enterprise all around the country. And we are seeing something radical going on. Doesn't make one news or the mainline papers, but communities, young people, established businesses looking to create more social value are coming to us in droves. But one of the problems is that building a business is really difficult, as you would well know. Doing traditional project or charity work, you tend to have the money and you tend to go and do the work, and then you go and ask for more money. If you're building a business which can actually create revenue to deliver social value over the longer term, it's much more difficult. So if you don't provide the support in the same way that we support businesses, a lot of these entrepreneurs are going to fall over. So this is what we're trying to do. In the same way that we have business incubators and a support system for businesses, we are trying to do the same support and services for social entrepreneurs. We don't just give money, we provide mentoring, capability building. We have a large number of corporate partners and professional partners which supply their skills and services to the ventures as we need them. So Russell McVeigh, our founding legal partner, will come in and provide excellent legal services to these entrepreneurs who are just trying to get going. And it makes a lot more sense for them to use their skills rather than going out to paint a fence or shake a bucket on Sunday morning to get funds for an organisation. We also increasingly developing a network of partnerships, people who know people, people who can put organisations in touch with other funders, other supporters, routes to market. So it's a holistic approach to organisational development. We also recognise that organisations need different things at different times. So when people are starting to develop their ideas, it looks very different from when they're seeking investment. And we've developed a number of programmes to support the different needs of social enterprises at different times. Just to give you a sense here, the capability building, we've been going around like a travelling circus around the country, working with communities and entrepreneurs to build their skills around building businesses. We've reached over 400 organisations in the last calendar year, and we're doing that work with NZ Post and Kiwi Bank. We've been building ventures. We now work with about 45 social ventures across the country. Our accelerator program, which we encourage people to apply for a 6-month intensive development program. We expected 80 applications in the country. We got 135. We've now got 11 organisations that we'll take through for 6 months. But my thinking is, what do we do for the other 120? Because at the moment there are people wanting to change the community but are not getting access to the support they need to do so. And last of all, we're starting to build a social impact investment program which will seek to connect ventures with investors and in time also start to build new types of capital fund to ensure that we can actually have some capital being directed at social return as well as economic return. So the size of the opportunity and the precedent overseas suggests that this is not going to go away, and there's a whole heap of good reasons why we should get behind and start building a social enterprise sector in this country. But the size of our organisation is tiny compared to the opportunity ahead of us. So we have to do in this collaboration. And I think my feeling in the discussions I've had with Richard is that the Rotary Club represent such a rich resource of skills, of networks, of advice, of goodwill, that Rotary could be a huge advocate of enabling social entrepreneurs to fulfil their potential in New Zealand. That's not a conversation we can have now over dinner, but I would really appreciate the chance to take that forward. Thank you. That's a really good question. So the first thing to recognise is that enterprise is the activity rather than the legal form. So a lot of social enterprises are actually set up as charities. So they have that kind of mission and asset lock embedded. But that said, there's also a whole heap of social enterprises which are set up as companies. So usually in their constitution, they are tailored to say that, to reflect their overall social purpose. But that in itself isn't 100% guarantee. In other countries, you see that there's actually new legal forms that have been established. So in the UK, you've got the Community Interest Company. You have Benefit Corporation in the States. Canada's got one as well, which basically, sort of brings these two things and gives confidence to both philanthropic and social investors that the money they're going to put in isn't going to be sort of suddenly transferred towards entirely private gain. So that's the regulation approach. The other thing that you need if you're a social enterprise, in the same way as you've got to make sense from a financial point of view and your balance sheet, you also have to report what your social impact is. So any social enterprise which is incapable of clearly reporting the change it's making in the world and the benefit it's creating, it's not doing its job properly. So even with the jeopardy side of legal form, you can tell whether something's actually making a change in the world or not. Technology is playing a big part, both in terms of change being delivered through technology, like Chalkle. They're using technology as an aggregator for learners to come together. It's an enabler of entrepreneurship because the barriers to entry are so low. Anybody can set up a business now, but crowdfunding is something which has a real alignment. Crowdfunding is still in its early days, and so we haven't got many case studies of proven success over time. But we tend to think, because social enterprises are focused on benefiting the community, that the community has an interest in supporting them as well. So be it through seed funding, with crowdfunding, through basically donations in the early stage of startup, or through equity if they're set up as a company at a later stage, I think crowdfunding is going to be a key component of enabled social enterprise going faster. Yeah. They are going to fail. Yeah. So without any doubt, if you're trying to set up a business, it's hard. It takes a long time, and a lot of them will fall over for any number of reasons. We tend to think that the failure rate might be a little bit higher at the moment because there aren't the supports in place to support social enterprises on one hand. But on the other hand, sometimes what social enterprises are trying to do isn't as difficult as maybe a high growth exportable company. So particularly at the community level, if you're trying to set up a basic workshop to create furniture to provide employment to youth, or trying to set up a small scale energy project, those things in themselves aren't really difficult. They are difficult for the communities to do because the capability might be quite low and the supports aren't in place. But it's just to say that I think the levels of ambition are quite different sometimes. So you do get the Chalkles who are entrepreneurial and want to export and want to change the world. But a lot of social enterprise is also a lot more modest in its ambition. It's about trying to involve local people to create local benefit. So that's a long answer to a short question, but I would say the failure rates are going to be high. Well, not high, but they're going to exist. But failure will happen for different reasons. I think the other point to mention is that a lot of tradition, I can say this, I've worked in NGOs and charities for a hell of a lot of my career. A lot of that work fails anyway, we just don't admit it. Yeah? So we tend to do things we think are going to work, and then we master reports and we tell our masters and our funders that things have worked better than they had. So when you're doing an enterprise, because you're out there trading, there's less places to hide. But that's also important because you know whether you're delivering impact or not, because your customers are always validating whether you're actually succeeding or not. Yeah. One of the things that I'm really interested about is this, like the Danone Grameen, about maybe that you have a company which is a company, and it's maybe quite difficult to change its DNA, other than sort of a more sort of evolutionary approach. But the opportunity to set up a joint venture is something which is a lot more feasible. And actually, I mean, one of the ventures that we're supporting at the moment is a joint venture between Bernardo's and the Sustainable Business Council. So the Sustainable Business, or some of their members, would like to employ more young mums, but childcare service isn't actually in place to actually support those mums to get into the workforce. And Bernardo's is saying, like, well, hang on, we can do this. So we don't know what the product or the service is, but coming together, they can create a market and provide a service to provide that opportunity to young mums. So I think the joint venture thing's really interesting, but I think it's kind of difficult for a big organisation, especially if it's already, the die is cast in terms of it's gone public and it's got, a responsibility to maximise profit for shareholders. It's going to find it very difficult to repurpose itself, to focusing on social value. I think one of the things about social enterprise is leverage. Okay, so it's in some ways at the moment we invest for financial return, or we give money away. So what social enterprise and impact investment says is you're going to get your money back, but basically you'll be investing in an organisation which is creating a whole bit of social value as well, and that's why you'd put your money there. So a grant is a minus 100% return. So anything, and in some cases you do actually get, some investments have actually given a negative return of like, say, minus 10%. But for a foundation who is there to actually, give donations to community organisations, that might actually be, a really good option rather than giving 100% of funds away the whole time. But, I mean, I think the point about displacement is that there would be some, particularly at the early stage when there's a competition for that grant funding to get things up and running. And at that point, I would say that that may hurt some existing charities and community organisations. But a lot of the organisations seeking to actually engage in social enterprise are those organisations as well. They're trying to transfer their own models because they're seeing the writing on the wall, and there's less public and philanthropic money to go around nowadays. So they have to adapt to survive. And also, I think the transparency about social enterprise, going back to the reporting, like, does this actually give a change? And I mean, I'm not apologetic for resources going to the organisations which are delivering more change than the ones which are masking it. So I think there is an argument for displacement. But, you know, I think, you know, this is the real world, and we have to think about ways where we can maximise change.